You gotta come into the thing.
I'm waiting for this guy. You ready?
Yeah, Phil.
I made pumpkin bread 2 ways. So this one is just plain, doesn't have anything on top, and then this one I did a little bit of a cinnamon sugar coating on top. So we're gonna try the plain one.
This is the diet
today.
one.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
the fat-free one. I'm just kidding. Cheers.
Cheers. That's delicious.
Thank you.
I'm gonna eat the whole thing.
Cool.
None for Carl. Very good.
Hi, I'm gonna make pumpkin bread today, and I'm gonna make it 2 ways. Basically what we're gonna do on the second version is just sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon and sugar on top. For this pumpkin bread recipe, it will call for 2 cups of all-purpose flour, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of pumpkin spice, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 3/4 cup of butter at room temperature, 2 cups of sugar, 2 eggs also at room temperature, and then 15 ounces of pumpkin puree also in room temperature. The pumpkin puree I actually make myself. It's fairly simple to do, but if you go to your local grocery store and just buy a 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree, that will work completely fine. So for this recipe, I'm gonna use my stand mixer fitted with a paddle attachment. I'll be using a spatula, a rubber spatula. His name is Frankie. And then I will be using a whisk to mix and sift basically our dry ingredients together. I will use a tablespoon, and then I will also be using 2 8-inch bread loaves for the actual loaves themselves, and then a handy dandy ice cream scooper for even distribution of when you're putting your batter into your bread loaves. So what I love about this recipe is you can actually substitute the pumpkin for mashed bananas. And then I also just take away the pumpkin spice and I just leave the cinnamon amount. So
Is it equal portion?
yes, equal portions. So 15 ounces of pumpkin mash. For this recipe, we're gonna be using the creaming method, and that's simply just taking softened butter and granulated sugar and whipping that for 3 to 5 minutes on medium speed. And that's gonna give us our light and airy and moist texture with the pumpkin bread. Before I start creaming the butter and the sugar together, I'm gonna mix all the dry ingredients and then set that off to the side so it's ready to go. This is already sifted. I'm gonna dump all the spices into the flour, and then a quick and easy way to sift without using a sifter with spices is just take a whisk and then just simply whisk all your ingredients together until it's fully incorporated. Fun little tip I learned working at a bakery. One thing I did forget to mention too is I actually add vanilla to my recipe. I normally mix it in with my pumpkin puree so that way some of the pumpkin absorbs the vanilla flavor. I'm gonna use 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract into the pumpkin puree. So I'm gonna start off with getting the butter going a little bit. Again, this is at room temperature, so it should be soft enough and ready to go. This is gonna be 3/4 cup of butter, and I'm gonna stick it into my mixer. His name is Norman, if anyone cares. So we'll just get that going. After you notice that your butter is pretty much covering the side of the bowl, this is now the time where you can start slowly adding your sugar. After all of the sugar is incorporated, I'm then gonna turn up the speed a little bit and I'm gonna get that whipping for about 3 to 5 minutes. You'll notice that it's gonna double in its size and the color is almost gonna look a little bit more pale than what it normally would. And it'll also have like kind of a glossy shine to it as well. That's when you know you're ready to add in your eggs. After every ingredient that you add to your next step, I'm always gonna stop the mixer and I'm gonna scrape the bowl down and then get it going again. I just wanna make sure that I'm not missing any ingredients that might get stuck on the side of the bowl. So we'll give it a good scrape around the sides. Make sure you're getting down to the bottom. Most mixers or stand mixers kind of have like a little divot at the bottom, so you just want to make sure that you're scraping that as well too, so nothing's getting stuck in there. So it's good. So again, I'm gonna start this on medium high, and I'm gonna let this sit for about 3 to 5 minutes. As you can see, the butter and sugar has now almost turned into like a white color. It's much different than what we first started with. And if you look inside the bowl, it's like basically doubled in size and the volume, which is exactly what we want. Like when we first started, it literally just looked like butter and sugar, but now this looks almost like a paste, like a cement paste. So I'm gonna give this a good scraping. I love to use my paddle as a little assist to get things off of my spatula. And then I'm gonna start adding the eggs slowly, one at a time. We just wanna make sure that the egg is like fully incorporated when we're mixing this. So we'll start this on low, little butter sugar trying to escape. So we'll get that one going. Once it's almost mixed, again, I'll stop the mixer, I'll scrape down the bowl, and then I'll add the second egg. Also, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm just one of those bakers that I somehow always get the ingredients on my fingers whenever I'm trying to scrape down the bowl. So don't be discouraged if you're more of a messy kind of baker, because that's totally okay too. You're just having fun. So last egg is gonna go in. Again, I'll get this incorporated, I'll scrape down the bowl, and then I'm gonna let this mix on a medium speed for about 1 to 2 minutes before I start adding in the pumpkin puree. If you take a look at the bowl, the mixture literally doesn't even look like granulated sugar and butter anymore. It's basically just a smooth paste. And again, it is doubled in size, which is exactly what we're looking for. I'm gonna slowly add the pumpkin puree and then slowly incorporate the dry. So we're just gonna mix this on low, just until the pumpkin is fully incorporated with the butter, sugar, and egg mixture. It will look a little bit broken. Don't worry about that, it's totally okay, it's normal. Also with this step, it's really important to scrape down the side of your bowl. There's just something with these two textures of ingredients like coming together that just have a little bit more of a difficult time fully combining all the way when you're using a stand mixer. So just make sure you're doing a little bit of an extra scrape on this step. Last step, before we put them in the baking pans, is we're gonna add the dry ingredients. With this, I like to add half and half at a time. So again, I'll add half of the dry into this mixture, turn off the mixer, scrape it down. And then the last time, I'm gonna take that a little bit slower, and I'm actually gonna stop the mixer, and then I'm gonna do just a little handful to make sure that I'm not over mixing the recipe. So we'll pour about half of the dry. Always go slow when you're mixing dry ingredients into your mixer. Talking from experience, I've definitely had it where I've put dry ingredients and then I just rip my mixer on high and it goes shooting everywhere all over you. So just want to make sure you're taking this slow. Cool. That step is done. It's really fast. Again, we don't want to overmix on this portion. So just until it is incorporated. And then I'm gonna add the last bit of dry ingredients. I'm gonna take this step even slower than before. And just when you're like right about here where you almost don't see any flour anymore, I'm gonna stop the mixer and then I'm gonna hand mix from there. And then whenever you're folding your ingredients, the key is obviously cut in the middle and then just slightly turn. Turn your bowl, cut in the middle, slightly turn. I'm probably only gonna be doing this about 3 or 4 times. Again, I just wanna make sure that anything that was on the bottom or the sides is fully incorporated. You can still see like there's some things that were missed by the paddle. And once everything is consistent, you're done. I have 2 8-inch bread loaves ready, and how I've prepared them is I've sprayed a little bit of cooking spray. I take a paper towel and I smooth it around all the edges. Then I take like a tablespoon of flour and I kind of dust it around. I'll dump any of the excess into the other greased bread loaf, and I'll do the same, and then whatever flour mixture I have left over, I'll just dump that in the trash, just because it's contaminated. I don't want to use that again. Then, since I'm super cautious, I like to take parchment paper that's fitted. You want to leave a little bit of a lip on the edges so that way it's an easy pull out for when your loaves are cooled. And then I have a handy dandy ice cream scooper, and that's just going to give us even measurements for each loaf. Lastly, I did talk about that we're going to make 2 versions of this pumpkin bread. So in a small bowl, I have about 15 grams of granulated sugar and then a teaspoon of cinnamon that we're just going to sprinkle on top of the loaf. So I'm going to start off by doing 3 scoops into each bowl. Take it, flatten it, and do 3. Also, if you're ever making cupcakes, use an ice cream scoop. They're super helpful to get an even amount of cupcake batter. The purpose of this is just to make sure that we're getting as much even batter distribution between each pan. So after I've gotten 6 scoops and I notice that my batter is getting a little bit low, I'm gonna alternate by doing 2 scoops at a time. We're pretty much almost done. I'm just gonna scrape this with my rubber spatula and just kind of evenly distribute this as evenly as possible. I just don't feel like there's enough to fully go in a scoop. And then once I do that, I'm gonna level off the loaves, and then I'll sprinkle the one with the cinnamon sugar mixture on top. So I'm trying to get all the batter into one little section in the bowl, and then I'll just kind of cut it in half, and I'll do a dollop to finish it off. Perfect. I feel like if you go like this, you're still mixing your batter. So I like to pat my batter and try to fit it into the loaf pans. Another technique is to take your pan and just go like this and it'll fill out. But since we work so hard on incorporating air into our butter and sugar mixture, I just don't want to like do that because I don't want to remove any air that we did in the mixing phase. So we're just going to gently pat. I always like to take the little bit of the extra, scrape it off on your bowl, and just dollop. The one with the little extra dollop, I'm going to do the sprinkle of cinnamon and sugar so that way it'll cover up that little dollop spot. So we're just going to lightly sprinkle on top. Remember that the sugar melts. Sugar does melt when it's heated at a high temperature. So we just want to make sure that we're not putting a bunch of sugar on top of the mixture just because we don't want it to like melt and become like hard, almost like a brulee crust. That's not what we're going for, and we don't want to break people's teeth. So these are ready to go in the oven. So again, 325 for 60 to 65 minutes. I've set the middle rack in the oven. I've taken out the rest of the racks and we're just gonna place them side by side next to each other. And they're gonna have a little baking party. So there you go. So you're gonna put your toothpick, and if it comes out clean, you know your bread is ready. Both are coming out clean. Another test that I like to use is a spring back test. If you feel confident enough, obviously be careful with this. You just take your finger and you'll touch the top of the loaf, and if the indentation springs back up, you know that your bread is ready. So perfectly coming back up. So these are ready to go. This actually only took me 60 minutes this go around, not 65. It is a little bit warmer today, so just take that into account when you are making your breads, that the temperature outside can actually affect the baking that's happening inside. So here is our cinnamon sugar topped one, nice little crust. And then here is our plain loaf. So I'm gonna let these cool for about 10 minutes. And then once they're cool, I'm gonna pop them out and then just let them cool to room temperature for about an hour on the wire rack. I took a little paring knife just around the edges that didn't have the parchment paper, just to make sure that we can release these out of the pan super easily. So now you're just gonna let these sit at room temperature on a wire rack for about an hour before you start slicing into your loaves.